Hello, brothers and sisters, fellow retainers. For those of you men watching this channel that are retaining their essence, their force, their source of life, keep it up. You won't regret it. That's a promise. That's not a personal promise. That's a divine promise. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. That's what wants to express is the essence behind the words, behind all appearance, behind the surface. Now, it involves all of us, of course, because there's not a separate source. And as you and me, as we inevitably, as there is the inevitable discovery of the presence of divinity, which is always now with us, eternally, we'll naturally see that the effects of the divine presence are a natural consequence. They're a radiance. They emanate from the divine essence itself. They're not selective acts by God. God is impartial, right? We all have the potential, infinite potential and free will. Otherwise, creation wouldn't have meaning and value. We all have the potential to embody this life essence to its fullest. And as we do, proportionately, the more we embody, the more there'll be discovery of the power of that presence in the effects, the outer appearance, the results that result from us making that choice with our free will to embody that presence, that essence, to are one and the same to the fullest. The effects of that choice will be experienced, will be witnessed as synchronicity, as divine revelation, as miraculous happenings, occurrence, as they unfold around us in the present. Always now, there's no sequence. We only interpret the appearance of that which is around us in terms of sequence, in terms of past and future. When we define ourselves as going back and forth between different moments of time, but it's all this moment. When we realize that presence, it's always with us, and it makes us fearless, worryless. We're never anxious. When we realize that presence, that sense of groundedness, but simultaneous transcendence, there'll be a profound sense of inner peace, of course. But we'll also realize that there really is no time. Time is an abstraction. It's a mental construct. And when there is no anticipation of the next moment of experiencing, which ordinarily propels, we could say, the lower self, the ordinary mind, the lower mind of man, the mind that's constantly in anticipation of the future, or thinking about the past, defining itself as something that happened, something otherwhere than right now, which is the only possible experience, right? Is this moment, which is ever fleeting. But it's at the same time eternity. We could say that God is eternity, because the only place that we're ever going to witness that presence is here and now. All of God's power, all of God's potential. It's not our personal power. The effects of the presence, of the essence within us, that is the source of our existence. We don't take personal credit for that. We humble ourselves before God. We do that through certain practice, through seeming attention, through meditation, to give our time to God in this moment now. To surrender onto divinity and say, I might not necessarily know what my destiny is, what your plan for me is. So I'm going to humble myself before you now and give my time to you. Give what I formerly thought was my personal time to you. And await divine inspiration to guide my action. Await for your revelation. Await for your presence to guide me, to express through me, to help me navigate this earthly reality and not pretend that I know arrogantly, to identify with mind and body, to realize that I am eternity in this present moment, to realize my essence. Through what one may call sacrifice. Now, there's a lot of different cultures where people went through intense, real sacrifice. But nowadays, society has gotten pretty soft. We have a lot of comforts and conveniences, which of course we can be grateful for. But the psychological equivalent of sacrifice that these other cultures and peoples have gone through to realize that presence, such as extreme fasting and whatever it may be, we don't have to go through those extremes personally, but the psychological equivalent to those sacrifices may be something as simple as letting go of an attachment, right? An addiction, if we're honest with ourselves. Now, somebody may say, I can't give that up. I can't give up my Diet Pepsi. Or I can't give up cigarettes. Can't give up my weed. Whatever it may be. But if I had a gun pointed to your head, this is a little extreme. But if somebody had a gun pointed to your head and said, you either give up that attachment permanently, or, you're taking your life away from you right now. Would you be able to give up the attachment? I think you would, because you value your life. Whether today you feel that way or not. Maybe you feel down in the dumps. But when it comes down to it, everybody's naturally grateful for their life. And how do we show that gratitude? Show that gratitude to God. We can give our time to Him, to the presence, through embodying our essence. We can engage and commit wholeheartedly to certain practice, such as, again, seeming attention, meditation. These are not things that I've come up with personally. These are ancient practices that have allowed people to attune to a higher frequency, to harmonically attune to different dimensions that are within the human capacity, within the human experience, so that they can effectively and efficiently and wholeheartedly feel and embody the presence to which we all have access, that is all inclusive. It excludes none. It's not exclusive. There's no sense of separation. Like I said, there's no selective acts by God. It's either you live in accordance with nature, with spiritual law, we could say, which is in accordance with nature, right? There's no separation between the manifest world, the worldly reality, and divinity, and the spiritual world. They're both expressing in eternity simultaneously, and it's up to us to live harmoniously so that we can witness this experientially, so that it's not just a mental conception, it's not an abstraction, it's something that we actually witness for ourselves. And as such, we'll be able to share it with everybody else. That presence will express effortless, simultaneous when you're in the personal presence of others. They'll naturally be uplifted. That's the best thing that anybody can do for their world. Whatever your ordinary role is, the best thing that we can not do, there's no person to do it, but that we can align to by humbling ourselves, is to spiritually evolve. We could say that's, it's in certain texts, it's called holy company. All that really means is that you're rooted and grounded in this moment, in eternity, and you embody that essence, and thus have a powerful presence which envelops and enwraps all those around you wherever you go. And it's not personal. The effects of the presence of your essence, your source, radiates forth unconditionally, spontaneously. It's not the result of a personality. It stems from humility, but there's no person to claim being humble, because it has nothing to do with emotionality. It's transcendent to our mentality, our body, emotionality, all these things that we may have formerly identified with. You could say it's pure spirit. There's so many different names for it. We don't want to think of it as something outside of us, because really it's our own subjectivity. It's our own continuous internal witnessing of reality, of our own existence, right? And as we get in tune with this, as we embody more of the life force, we'll start to experience bliss, unconditional bliss. It's not dependent on anything outside of us. We may imagine that this and that can bring us happiness, but really all happiness is sourced. It's sourced and stemmed. I combine those two words, right? No mistakes. You can't make a mistake. Anything that happened even a few moments ago, you can let go, because it has nothing to do with right now. Like I said, this moment is ever fleeting, but at the same time, it's eternal. So we don't want to live for passing pleasure. We want to live for the eternal. As I speak to you now, I'm conscious of a buzzing in the brain. And it's that energy. It's that upward flow of the essence, rather than their perpetual downward flow that a lot of humanity unfortunately witnesses within themselves. That downward flow of the essence of our life energy by releasing their seed continuously, habitually, or constantly eating and ingesting and consuming, which forces the essence to be constantly involved in digestion, are the bodily processes that are involved when we engage in certain activity. Maybe unconsciously identifying with the body by thinking that the continuance of our life is dependent on something outside of us, on an external source of energy, on food, whatever it may be. But we want to use our discriminative faculty so that we can see lucidly and clearly and realize that it's divinity, the source within, that allows us to exist from moment to moment. Is it by any skill of yours that food digests in your stomach? Is it money or men that supports you? No, it's God acting through money and men as revelation, as synchronicity that allows you to exist, that supports you as you live, as you be in this earthly reality. Would you be able to exist if the Lord right now were to take your life breath? You can go many days without food. You can go many days without water. Check out a couple videos ago. Talked a little bit about dry fasting. I mentioned that not to pat myself on the back, and I just looked at the time. It was 1818, right? That's also symbolic. Eternity. One. The eternal symbol. 8. There's one eternity, and that's it right now. I just looked at the clock. Time, right? 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. One cannot really live 70 years at all. It's calendar years, right? That's an abstraction. So we don't want to get caught up in personal memory and history and talk like, oh, I remember this. I remember when I was in high school, I was the best football. I was the star of the team. And like, but what are you doing now, right? That's part of humility too. Like, we've all done great things in our past. We've all experienced some great stuff, right? But what are you right now? What are you doing today that's of selfless service, or that's allowing yourself to witness the sacredness of all life as it expresses, as it emanates from the divine essence, as the presence of which is continuously expressing as life And thus we treat all of life with a sense of reverence, with worship. We see it as its sacredness. Whatever it is, we can, like I just said, have discernment and discrimination, but at the same time realize that divinity is impartial. In order to navigate the world, to function in society, we want to have discrimination. We want to be able to be partial, to read between the lines, to see the different nuances, right? But at the same time, we can realize that part of us that's impartial, that the essence of our existence is the same essence looking through you and the baby, and it's not looking through the tree, but we can feel it as we connect with Mother Earth, which the body is going to inevitably go back to, right? So we don't want to identify with something temporary. You want to see that part of us that's eternity. It's eternal. But that same essence, which gives life, which gives awareness, which gives light to you and me and the tree and the baby, the innocence, right? Unprogrammed, not contaminated by any conditions or beliefs or mental abstractions, whatever it may be. That same essence, which gives life and awareness to everything, is impartial. It's all inclusive. It has nothing to gain. It's whole and complete in this moment. It's not like we could say the ego, right? The ordinary mind, the lower self, which is constantly seeking something outside, anticipation of the future. Deluded by time. And, it's not necessarily our fault because we're brought up in a system, a school system that teaches us that, you'll be happy when you get this, when you graduate. And then some of us never snap out of that. We go through our whole lives long thinking that, the next best thing is something outside of us. What's that Boston song? Always comes to mind, right? It's about peace. It's like, what's the line? I'm not going to say it verbatim, but climbing to the top of the company ladder, hope it doesn't take too long. Won't you see it come a day where it doesn't matter? Now that is verbatim, but basically he's saying, people living in competition. All I wanna do is help my peace of mind. Ah! No, pardon my singing. It's not my day job. But you get the point, right? That's saying something in a fun way. It's a great vibe, good music, but he's saying something pretty profound. He's talking about peace of mind, but really, peace is beyond mind. Peace is something transcendent to mind. It's when we realize we're not a mind. We can utilize the mind, our mental faculty. We're not enslaved to it. We can utilize it. The ego is a great servant, dangerous master, right? I've already mentioned that in a couple other videos. We can utilize it, but we don't identify with it. We can compartmentalize it. We can compartmentalize certain things that may happen during the day that may not be optimal, that, we may initially react to, that we may experience a habitual reaction within ourselves too. But we can, immediately compartmentalize that and realize that's not us. That's not the eternal, right? We can realize that we're not the mind. We can disidentify with the mind in thus time, and thus realize a peace beyond mind, not a peace of mind. There is really no peace of mind, because if you identify with mind, then life is not really going to be peaceful, because you think you're a mind, and that thus it's conditional. It's rooted in time. But when you transcend the mind, you realize that you are really eternal, that your position in this world is constitutional. You realize that you're an eternal servitor of the Lord, and this life will be blissful because you're living in a selfless way. We could even say it's a selfish way, because doing good for others makes you feel good. It makes you feel really good. There's a huge reward in that. Something which is way beyond serving the senses, serving our person, serving our habits, serving our mental habits and our mind and what the body wants to do, and serving our personal selves. When we serve everybody else, we include life as a part of us, right? All inclusive, then there's a huge reward to that. We experience that. So we could even say it's selfish, because what I want for myself, I want for everybody else, right? I want to include everybody as a part of this presence, as a part of this divine essence. And we can only do this when we realize that source within us, when we realize that's not outside of us. It's expressing as everything outside of us, but it's beyond the appearance. It's intrinsic to everything in the world, but at the same time independent of it. It's transcendent to it, but at the same time immanent. And that's the seeming paradox. Now, I'm speaking in concepts, right? But ultimately, divinity is beyond concepts. It's at the same time in these words, that energy as it expresses, but at the same time, to try to conceptualize it is to thrust it away almost, because it's that eternal presence which is founded and rooted in that silence. That silence behind all the chaos and the noise around us. Beyond the sequence of appearance. It's that silence in between the thoughts. It's that space of awareness within us, which is pure attention. Pure attention is not discrimination. It's not, judging the world around it. It's simply lovingly aware. It's a loving witness. And I'm witnessing this. If you realize the candle, the light behind me, I'm smelling something burning. So we're going to move that, right? I've already had one house fire, not trying to have another. You can check out that video. Heck, I'll put a link in the description. Talking about context, right? Context versus content, focusing on the forms, the content, the appearance of the world, and realizing that our subjectivity is pure context. I talk about context in that video, so that's important, right? We want to expand our awareness, our